Wicked cool. Feature alert.
Hey there, podcast fans. Thanks for listening. Now, you can also reach out and send me a text message. On every episode, at the top of the show notes, you'll see a link that says, send us a text message. Simply click it, write something super nice and sweet, and away we go. Also remember to please subscribe, share this podcast with a friend by telling them about it, and leave us a positive review, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, your favorite podcast streaming service, or even on our website at www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com.
So I think the paranormal is the great evener, because every sexuality, every financial status, every race, every color, every age has a fascination in the magic of the world around us and trying to see those moments for themselves. The rest of the world is what's scary.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
Well, tonight is a bucket list episode. I have a guest I'm very excited to feature on this podcast. His name is Dave Schrader. And if the name sounds familiar, you've probably heard him on the radio and or seen him on TV on the Travel Channel on various shows. So let me tell you a little bit about Dave. From an early age, Dave Schrader has been surrounded by the strange and anomalous, from haunted homes to creature sightings, UFO encounters, and more. Now, as an experienced paranormal investigator, he travels the world, seeking the truth and following the claims of ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs, monsters, myths, and legends. You can find Dave streaming on Max and Discovery Plus's hit series, The Holzer Files, and Ghosts of Devil's Perch. Dave has also appeared on Paranormal State, Ghost Adventures Screaming Room, Paranormal Challenge, Haunted Hospitals, Fright Club, and in the Shock Docs, The Curse of Lizzie Borden and Demon in the White House. Dave has lived in Minnesota for 35 years with his family, which includes 11 children and 8 grandchildren. He has been a mainstay of local radio on KLBB, KTLK, WCCO, Coast to Coast AM, and as host of his own podcast, The Paranormal 60. Wow, I got a great show tonight with probably two of my favorite people in the paranormal, and one of them I didn't meet until just a couple minutes ago. First off, sometimes co-host Cuyle Carvin is back from a 6-month hiatus. You were on a Netflix series, Cuyle, so how did that go?
It was. It went well. It was probably the biggest opportunity of my career. Maybe the last, because I don't know how I feel about this acting thing anymore. But yeah, it went really great.
Yeah, can you at least name drop a couple of the main actors that were in that?
Well, there's this guy, I think he's going places. There's this guy, Robert De Niro, who's the main guy. And then Jesse Plemons, Angela Bassett. Then there's me.
Yeah, I saw a picture of you. There was a shot like a Getty image where you were with them. That's great.
It was just good timing, like in right time, right spot type of situation. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. We look forward to on Netflix, and I don't want to hurt your feelings, Cuyle, but actually the guy I'm really stoked to talk to tonight is Dave Schrader. If anybody follows the paranormal, they know Dave Schrader from, Darkness Radio, Coast to Coast. He was a guest host. He was more recently on the Holzer Files. He's been on shock docs like The Curse of Lizzie Borden. Dave, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'd rather hear from Jesse or hear from Kyle. I'm sorry about working with Robert De Niro. I'm really boring compared to that.
Yeah. Not to name drop, but I guess I will. He actually had another movie. He was in a cockpit with Tom Cruise, believe it or not, where it was kind of one of his other scenes. So,
hey, can we watch the language? This is a family show.
Yeah, I know.
No, sorry, we'll edit that out. So, hey, thank you so much for being here. I had kind of a 1 degree of connection with you, with Jeff Belanger, who was in my documentary, did a great job. And Jeff he's so excellent to interview. I knew when I was interviewing him, he knew in his mind, he said something that I think he knew was going to be the close of the documentary, and it was. It was like so perfect. I think he's just so good. He knows how to like phrase things, and I swear to God, he knew that was going to happen. But he said something that was perfect for the ending for the documentary. So he was great, and he's been on the show. Actually, for my company, I hired him for to do kind of a Halloween special where he did his library talk. So it was really good. So you guys are best buddies. You go back a long way. I kind of want to go back a long way on you and then talk about your early days. I read somewhere that in your childhood, there was your first kind of paranormal encounter was with the ghost of your grandmother.
Yeah. She passed away when I was very young, about 2.5 years old. And at that age, you just don't grasp the concept of death. My mom would tell me, grandma's gone now. She's up in heaven watching out for us. And none of that makes any sense to a child. I mean, to me, that means she's hovering up in the clouds somewhere watching down, which I always thought was just really weird. But we ended up staying at my grandfather's quite often, and I would sleep in what used to be my grandmother's room. My grandmother and grandfather loved each other, but my grandfather snores like you're throwing beer bottles into a chainsaw. So they had to sleep on opposite ends of the house. Well, mom would come pick me up, and I would be telling her stories of how grandma came to read to me last night, or tell me stories, or tuck me in for sleep. And my mom would, honey, that's nice. You're just dreaming of grandma. And this happened over the course of, a while of visiting my grandfather. And finally, I got very specific one day about my grandmother, and my mom just decided she's going to talk to her sister, my aunt, about it. And she said, Judy, it's really weird. She goes, Dave seems to dream about mom every time he's over at dad's house. And she goes, what do you mean? Well, he's been telling me whenever he goes over there that she shows up, she reads to him, she tells him stories, she tucks him in. And she said, and it was really weird because he mentioned she was dressed in this polka dot dress with a necklace, but she was funny. She didn't have all of her teeth. And my aunt's jaw hit the ground. My grandmother died, and when she passed away, she was dealing with cirrhosis and a blood aneurysm. My grandmother didn't look like herself, so they had her in a closed casket. And the only people that knew what she was buried in were my aunt, who went out and got the dress. She brought it to my grandfather, who brought it to the mortician. So I, down to the last detail, mentioned how my grandmother looked in the coffin, never having seen her. And the fact was that they did remove her teeth, her false teeth, for burial. So I had that kind of specificity to it. And that really kind of alarmed my mom that I knew that many details, although at that time she didn't know that I was spot on with it. And then my aunt told her, and then my aunt dropped another bomb and said, well, Terry, I've gotten a phone call from mom after she died. Wow. So yeah, we had this kind of thing in our family, I guess, and so it's never been a taboo subject. It's always been very open and cool. My mom always supported my interest in it. And she was always reading books about the paranormal and ghost stories. And so was my aunt. So it's just a part of growing up.
Are you an empath, Dave? Is that like, because when I've seen you on TV, I've heard you on, the podcast and on radio. Do you have psychic abilities at all? Because if you do, you don't mention much of that I've heard.
It's funny because what do you discern a psychic or medium to be? And I'm always one to say I'm not psychic, I'm not a medium, but yet I've seen ghosts and I've heard ghosts and I've interacted with ghosts. So I guess in a way I am a medium. It's not like Jennifer Love Hewitt right, in Ghost Whisperer. And it's not having the ability to just go in and see a ghost or know there's something there. If the spirit wants to be seen or heard, I can usually connect with it, but it's not from me going in trying. It's like the spirit is crying out and wants to be connected to. So empath might be a little bit of a better term, like you mentioned, but I'm not mediumistic in any other sense. I've had the abilities to see and talk to the ones that want to be seen and spoken to.
That's incredible that you've actually seen and heard, because usually, like, I've had like maybe EVPs that I heard, and I had kind of a weird experience after I made the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
There's this theory of like when we're somewhere around the ages of 4 or 5, where we have kind of slip into the other side of this theoretical veil,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. But it sounds like, do you have these memories of your grandmother? And it sounds like it's still something that you can still see that, it seems like.
I can't actually. I have no memory of the experiences.
Oh, wow.
It was just my mom telling me about this. I was 2.5, 3 years old when this was going on. But then the house that we moved into, we had, went to an apartment. The apartment was flooded twice. We moved into another one that burned down. We moved back in with my grandfather for a short time, and then my parents bought a house in Medina, Illinois, which is the most white bread little town in Illinois you could imagine, and it was a haunted house. We don't know why. I've spoken to the former owners as an adult. I grew up with the girls that used to live in that house, and they never had any kind of paranormal experiences, or at least none that they could remember. But, my dad's a tough Chicago construction worker. My mom's was a nurse. And we would you'd be upstairs and you'd hear somebody talking or moving around downstairs. My mom or dad would go down there mad, thinking I left my TV on in my room. They'd go down, there'd be nothing on. They'd be downstairs and hear rattling and banging around. And my dad would stop running around up there. Yeah. And then he'd come upstairs and I wasn't home. So, just that kind of weirdness, but it was never anything terrifying. It was just always, you knew you weren't alone.
Yeah. What was like growing up? At what point did you start to recognize like this is something that you had wanted to pursue?
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I talk about this I do presentations around the world, and I've learned to kind of meld paranormal and motivational into one. I believe in manifestation and intention setting. And I was a kid, I was 6, 7 years old with my black tape recorder sitting in my buddy's garage doing Hardy Boys radio shows, right? Because we used to love to listen to the little cassettes of the old time radio shows of Abbott and Costello, or the Hindenburg Crash, or the Shadow, or the Lone Ranger, and those little radio dramas. So we used to create our own, and I wanted to be in radio so bad as a child. Used to do all these fun fake radio shows with my buddy Rick. And God, I wish I had those recordings today. My kids would love them. But I did that, and I believe that set the course for me. That manifested my eventual future. I went off to college and really had no direction. I knew I was going to be a dad, and just what am I going to do with my life? And I lived right across the street from campus, and my roommates are like, Dave, come on, you got to get out and make other friends. We were renting an entire house, and I knew the guys that I lived with back from home in Chicago. So I was going to Winona State University. So finally I went out one day at their behest. And as I walked out, there was a cute girl. It was 1988, blonde with a ponytail and short 1980 shorts, walking across campus. So before it was called stalking, guys, it used to be walking, chasing a girl, right? So I followed her across campus, followed her into the Performing Arts Center, and I thought, oh, this is cool. They're doing play tryouts. I've done some plays. Maybe I'll try that. And she walked past that, and then there was past the choral group and past the concert players and the musicians, and then she went up a flight of stairs. I followed her up the flight of stairs, and then we got into this one long hallway where it was just the two of us. So now I knew it was going to start to get kind of spooky for her. So I actually stopped and started looking at the bulletin board and looking at all the things posted. And then I watched as she went into the last door on the left at the end of the hall. And I waited a few minutes, and then I walked down there and I opened up the door, and there on the door it says KQAL, your radio alternative, now looking for on-air talent. And it was the college radio station.
Wow.
So I walk into the station and I'm like, yes, they're hiring, and there's hot blondes. And I walk in and I'm met by 5 guys.
Yeah.
And they're all like, "Hey, welcome, blah, blah, blah. Are you interested in working here?" And I sat there talking, but my head's on a swivel the whole time as I'm looking for the cute blonde. And yeah, I'll start tomorrow training. Yeah, great. Hey, out of curiosity, I saw this little blonde walk in here just before I got here. What happened to her? And they all just stopped and looked at each other, and then they looked back at me and they're like, "Do you think if there was a cute little blonde in here, we'd be talking to you right now?" And I'm like, "Dude, I watched her walk into this room." And it turned out the Performing Arts Center was very haunted. So,
Wow.
right. Is that
I did
weird
not
or
see a
what?
ghost story coming out of this. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was a ghost. I don't know if it was God's way of getting me into my life. He's like, "Hey, this idiot's too dumb to go across campus and learn there's a radio station," something he's always wanted to do.
Yeah.
So he put the only thing that would grab the attention of, a 20-year-old boy as a 20-year-old cute blonde. And I followed her across campus and got into radio.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's an
like,
amazing story. Yeah.
yeah,
I
it
thought
is.
I thought this was how you met your wife, Dave. I was gonna be like, wow, it's like God.
I thought he was describing
No,
his
that was
first
much
encounter in
easier.
jail.
Yeah. I bought her through the Ukrainian wife swap.
Oh yeah, send me that
That's
link after the show because I'm looking too. So yeah, that's great. You know what's interesting? When I look at your bio, it says you started in Darkness Radio 2006. Doesn't seem that long ago, but that's like the early days of paranormal radio, right? Isn't that kind of, there weren't many other things around at that point?
Well, there's been paranormal radio since the 1950s, and 60s. Long John Nebel was a very big, prominent name back in the day. And then, of course, you had Art Bell, who started Coast to Coast AM. And he found that leaning more into the strange and supernatural garnered a lot more listeners. So they were around for quite a while. But when we took off with our show in 2006, there were only about 4 or 5 other paranormal themed radio shows that I could find. There was Ghostly Talk. There was Todd Sheets and Night Watch. There was Jim Harold and the Paranormal Podcast.
Yeah, that's what I listened to. Yep.
Right. So that's what started me, was Jim Harold's podcast. And I had also lucked into having attended an event and becoming friends with Jason and Grant from Ghost Hunters. And a month after that, my buddy from college calls me up and he says, "Hey, I'm managing this radio station and I have a 1-hour slot on Sunday nights to fill." And I hadn't been in radio since 1990. And he goes, "Do you want to do a radio show together?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "What topic should we cover?" I said, "How about the paranormal? We both loved that in college." And he's like, "Sure. Yeah, we could do that." And I thought it was cool because our station on the dial here in Minnesota was AM 1440. And the next station up was AM 1500, where Coast to Coast lived. Our show was 11 to midnight, and then Coast to Coast came on at midnight till 4 in the morning. So I said, people scanning the AM dial are going to hit our show looking for Coast, and we'll just build it slowly. And that's how we did. So we were on radio terrestrial for 2 years. Then for about a year, we were just podcasting, which was still kind of in its relatively new state. And then another radio station here in the Twin Cities, K-Talk, KTLK, picked us up, brought us on, and we went from Saturday and Sundays from 9 to midnight to Monday through Friday, 11 to midnight, then 10 to midnight, then 9 to midnight. I said if we would just stayed on there for another 5 years, we'd have been on 12 hours a day. But we were slowly crawling our way up, and we did that, and I was a part of that until just after COVID. And, I'd lost, I think I lost somewhere in the neighborhood of about 18 people in my life during COVID. And when it got down and all said and done, I just took a break from it all. And I needed a couple months, and I stepped away, and my former co-host and partner took over Darkness Radio and continued on with that. And then I realized I missed doing this kind of thing, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow of him and his new partner. So I just launched the Paranormal 60 podcast, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
It's funny. You mentioned manifesting things, and I have a very mini manifestation story. I was listening to Jim Harold too around 2006, and I first thought I'd love to be a guest on his show, and I actually was a couple times, and then I had him as a guest on my podcast, which is really cool. To me, that was a good thing, having kind of a lesser-known podcast, but being able to do that. So I totally get the manifestation thing, because I kept thinking about it, and it happened.
Well, yeah, look, here I manifest wanting radio from a very early age, and then I end up in radio when we started it, and I thought, well, this is cool. We'll be like the opening act for Coast to Coast. Even though we're on 2 different stations, we're, like content, people might find us. And then eventually we ended up on the same station with Coast to Coast, got dropped off of AM 1500 and moved over to K Talk. We were the opening act for them every night from 11 to midnight, and then 10, and then 9. And then I got asked, Ian Punnett, who was one of the hosts, would come in and host from K Talk. And when he decided to step down to continue his education and deal with his tinnitus, he threw my name in the hat, and I got a call from Coast to Coast, and they asked me to become a regular fill-in host. And I did that for 5 years and loved doing that. And eventually I just stepped away from it because I was doing my radio show 5 days a week. I was doing Coast to Coast 4 or 5 times a month. Plus I was doing another radio show called Midnight in the Desert, which was Art Bell's final radio show. After he passed away, I took over that radio show.
Yeah.
And I was filming the Holzer Files TV series. So there just wasn't enough hours in my day. And so we separated from Coast, and I eventually separated from Midnight in the Desert, and that was it. But everything led to the next step. And these are things that I've always envisioned as part of my life. The TV thing, not as much, but the doors opening and allowing me to do these things, see these places, visit. I never really got to travel much until I was 40 years old, and I started the radio show. You know, I maybe had seen 8 or 9 states. And in the last 18 years, I've hit 46 of the 50 states. I've been to, I think, 12 different countries. And, you know, it's really cool that when you open yourself up to this, you can have these experiences. It's like the paranormal. You go into places and you set that intention to have experiences and let the spirit realm know that you're open to it and protect yourself. And you can have some really amazing communication.
Did you cross paths with Michelle Fried at all when you were doing Midnight in the Desert?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. She's cool. She actually gets a lot of guests for me on the show. So yeah, she's awesome. Yeah. She's okay. Cool.
Michelle's awesome. She was my booker on Midnight in the Desert. So
yeah, she's great.
She was my guest booker. Yeah. And she's fantastic. And she's a remote viewer.
Yep.
And a producer on some films and such involving Bigfoot and the paranormal. So I love Michelle. She's great.
Yeah, she's cool. I mean, she didn't want to be a guest. I was like, come on, you got to be a guest. You do remote viewing. And then she did it. And I think now she does it a lot, which I'm so happy because she was a great guest. So she's excellent at booking talent, but she's also a good guest on podcasts as well. So
agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, real quick, Dave, you've been on so many radio shows and television shows, and you've written books and so much more. You've been exposed to so many different the subtopics of the paranormal. Is there something that you want to explore that you haven't yet? Is there any like burning desire for any particular thing?
Well, I had what I believed to be a Bigfoot experience when I was about 12. But it was at, 50 yards away, and it was behind a bush, just kind of pushed the top of the bush down and looked at my cousin and I. Mm-hmm. So I remember it clearly. And this was before Bigfoot was a major part of my lexicon. I was 1977 or 78. And although the Patterson Gimlin film had been out there and shows like In Search Of, it still just wasn't something that rendered in your mind right away. So I've had an interest in going out to an active Bigfoot location to see if I could have an encounter. And I love the concept of aliens and UFOs. And I have gone to places that are known to be hotbeds, and I've had weird experiences, but I would very much like to meet and would very much like the ability to remember the meeting. And, I may have met 100 of them and been up on the ship 1,000 times. I've got 11 kids on this planet. God knows how many other planets I'm populating, So I'd love to have some memory of that and actually get those answers as well. But I never wanted to be the guy just sitting behind the microphone.
Yeah.
I wanted to explore. And when they told me that there was a high chance of having this kind of experience if you went to this location, I'd go. And I just wanted to see these things and be a part of it for myself.
Yeah. Were there any points in any of your active investigations and go-sees of anything that you were terrified of? Did anything like really stop you and make you rethink, like, what am I doing here?
Yeah. When I filmed the very first episode of the Holzer Files, we filmed it at the Whaley House in San Diego. And I was reluctant because that tree had been picked of its fruit for so many years by so many TV shows and specials. that I was like, why are we going here? Other than the fact, we were following the footsteps of Dr. Hans Holzer, and it is one of the most famous locations he put on the map because of his investigations and writing about it. So we had to look into that. I love that what we were able to uncover was a different element of the story. And during our investigation, I got knocked to the ground. And, I'm a fan and friends with most of the people on other paranormal shows, but I often wondered how much of this is overacting and overreacting. And would kind of roll my eyes at the concept, oh yeah, they've been pushed. And that just didn't register for me. But when we're filming that, you see me kind of slump up and I hit Shane, who's standing up against the wall, and then I fall forward and hit the ground. And I turn around, not expecting it's got anything to do with the paranormal. I really thought that a cameraman had probably come around me and in the dark tripped and it fell into me because it felt that heavy and forceful. When I turned around and there's nothing there, my brain just broke. I wasn't afraid, but I was definitely uncomfortable. I stood up. I kind of tried to wrap my head around it and excuse myself. And I went outside, and they've got the footage of me walking around out there talking to myself. And I'm like, I don't know how to process what just happened to me. And I did go back into the house and confronted the spirit and confronted what was going on. But I did it in a place of empathy and compassion and said, all right, you got my attention. You don't have to hurt people, which is what some of the reports were. Some people, especially in the area we were, they believed had passed out or had fallen to the ground before. And to have this actually happen, that blew my mind, because I never thought that force, that Hollywood horror movie force, was a real thing until it hit you. And then I was like, oh man, I got to show a lot more respect for this, because I'm getting older and my parts are hard to replace. So I don't get bounced around like a ball too often. So it gave me, I think, a really great perspective as a way to investigate. And I treated everything with a lot more love, respect, and empathy, even for the ghosts that were really scary for people. I realized, what this is? It's like dealing with one of my children that are having a fit. You can overreact and get all blustery and be a jerk, and it's probably just going to get worse. Or you can stand back and let them burn themselves out a little bit and then go, okay, what's bothering you, buddy? What can I do for you? And when we started with that approach, we really got some great results. And many of the places that we visited, we'd hear back from the owners or business employees, and they would tell us it really calmed down, a lot after we left. So I was proud of that.
One of the shows I saw you on, the Shock Doc, The Curse of Lizzie Borden, and the seance there, was that another startling experience? It seemed like it was.
Yeah, during I had been there to the Lizzie Borden house before, and it was always really kind of an interesting place, but I wondered how much of the story was influencing or affecting the way you feel when you're in the house, as opposed to it actually being paranormal. That part kind of played in my mind. But when we went back to film, and I got to work with one of my dearest friends, Chris Fleming, who's a medium, and Luann Jolly, who is an EVP specialist, and then they were going to bring Sam Beltrusis in as nothing more than a kind of a connective tissue. He was related to the Borden family, and he was supposed to just come in and tell us his little bit of the story. But he was so impacted by the energy that was there and so affected by it. I told the director, boy, if we can keep him on, I think he's going to be an integral part of this investigation. And luckily, Sam stayed on and became a part of that episode with us, or that documentary. When we were doing the seance in Lizzie's room, we were all holding hands at the table. I was really unnerved at first because you could hear something rapping under the table, like it was walking under the table and knocking at different spots around it. That was weird. Then as I'm holding hands with the medium, Chris Fleming, his arm starts twitching and freaking out. And I'm like, what is going on with him? And then he lets go of my arm, and it's my arm that's doing it, not his. And I was so disconnected from that. It just, my brain didn't know how to process the experience. And he said, I've seen this before, Dave, just keep your eyes closed, keep relaxed. And he goes, get me a pen and paper. And he put a pen in my hand and a pad of paper, and I began automatic writing, which I really kicked myself because I fought it so hard. And we got a few messages through it, but I wonder if I had leaned into it and allowed it to happen, would it have been better? But I hurt for days after that, because it was like doing major isometric workout I was trying to fight the movement of my arm that I had no control over. That was really disconcerting to not be able to control my own body part.
I remember watching that, and I remember thinking, man, he seems really uncomfortable with what's going on. It's like, wow.
I'd worked with Cindy Keza, the medium, on the Holzer Files and Ghosts of Devil's Perch TV show, and she would automatic write, but she was so fluid with it. Because she let it come through her.
Yeah.
When it came through me, I was not prepared for that. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand it. And I also understood I'm filming a TV show. I can't scream and run out of the room like a little Nancy and then ruin the shot for everybody and blow the minute. We're making a communication. So I had to kind of find that mid ground where I allowed myself to stay in the moment, as freaky as it was for me. And I'm glad I had the experience. Like I said, my biggest regret is that I didn't relax into it more and just allow it to take place.
Yeah, I think most people would react that way, though. That's crazy. On the terrified theme. So was there ever any guests on any of your radio programs that just gave you a bad feeling that they were on and you just felt they were pure evil? I mean, you don't have to say names or anything, but was there ever any guest that made you really uncomfortable and you couldn't wait until the show was over?
No, never that I felt like I was dealing with somebody evil. I could tell there were a few times that I was dealing with somebody that was definitely mentally unstable, but I didn't really feel it was demonic or anything paranormal. And those I just felt more kind of saddened by those moments. I had a few guests throughout the years that, like Ed Azosky, and I don't mind naming him because he was such a blustering buffoon, but he came on our radio show and, he was this EVP expert and specialist, and he did 2 hours of my show. And in the first hour, all he did was tear down every paranormal TV show, how bad they are, how schlocky they are, how bad they are at gathering evidence, how bad they are at presenting their evidence. He's a real investigator. He gets the real stuff. And we're going to listen to that in the second hour. So we go to break, we come out, my producer and I are kind of talking, and he's like, boy, this guy's just kind of a jerk. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? If he's like Dr. Hans Holzer, if he's like Dr. William Roll, Dr. Barry Taft, people that have been out there for a long time and watching everybody else skyrocketing in fame and fortune based on the back of the work of all of these guys, I can understand being kind of disgruntled that you're getting legitimate evidence and these people came out of nowhere and now they're major TV celebrities. So we were, again, trying to be empathetic towards our guest, and we came back in and he had a bunch of EVP and we played a bunch of his EVP and it was garbage. But his one holy grail was this amazing piece of evidence that he had. And this voice that he captured is a long dead language. He's had linguists from around the world try to discern it and they couldn't break it. They couldn't figure out what it was. It was just really strange. And he said, but the real message was in playing it backwards. And we hear this, is my baby, save it. Right. And it's like, did you hear that? And I'm like, yeah, but can we play it forward again? So I phonetically type into my Google search what I hear and something pops up. So I look at the screen and I say, play it one more time. And they play it. Now, when somebody tells you it's a long dead language, you're kind of listening for like a Latin sound or something. And I hear this AVS media demo. And I'm like, what the hell does obvious media demo mean? And literally there's a audio media company called AVS Media. And if you were using their free version of their software, it was their demo and it had an audio watermark. So about every minute or two, when you were recording, you would get this recording, AVS Media Demo. And I broke it to him on the show and I tried to be respectful. And he, no, but that's not even the message. And I said, I know. And that's why during the break, I had my producer record himself saying AVS Media Demo. Now, can you play it backwards, Tim? And sure enough, you hear Tim's voice go, is my baby, save it. And I said, so I think you've just, you've made a mistake, which I understand. And the guy even admitted to using AVS Media as his recording software.
Wow.
But he couldn't wrap his head around it and got really, really rude with us. And I felt, again, my heart broke for this guy because this was like his career defining piece of evidence. And in under a minute and a half, I debunked it. Here he's had linguists from around the world that can't break this and audio technicians that can't understand this EVP or how he collected it so cleanly. And I explained to him what a watermark is. Yeah. And it broke his heart. And he was such a rude jackass after to us about that, and then continued for days sending just hate-filled email to us and telling me, yeah, well, you're garbage and people will long be talking about my name, well after you're off the air. Well, I'm going on almost 20 years on the air.
Well, I think you highlighted part of the stigma with the whole paranormal study is folks that are heavy skeptics or just complete non-believers. It's so easy for them to look at those kind of examples and just poo-poo on everything.
Yeah.
When you have such a loud voice saying, who is so emphatic saying, here's evidence, this is real. And when it's so easily debunked, it just gives the whole thing such a leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And that's like a really good example of it all.
Sure.
I was going to ask, you've been on multiple shows, but it feels like there has to be some sort of blend or balancing act with the idea of having an entertaining hour of television with also an authentic experience for the study, for the investigators involved. And I can totally see the side of folks, again, going to who are heavily skeptics, who will be like, how can they find something in every episode? It must be hard to kind of balance all that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, a lot of the shows, and they've admitted it, have filmed episodes that they don't end up showing or using because they got nothing.
I see.
For 5 years, I was working behind the scenes on Ghost Adventures as a location scout. But I had been a longtime friends with the guys. I had them on my radio show before their first documentary ever aired and just became friends with them. And when their series kicked off, I think it was season 2, I got invited to be the first guest investigator with them at Rolling Hills Asylum. So throughout the years, I would pop in as a guest. I've been on, I think, 10 or 12 episodes of Ghost Adventures, plus their 2 live Halloween specials. And I can tell you, what you see on the episodes is exactly how it happened when I was there. I can promise you that. We did an episode called The Demon House in Seattle. And I love that it's out there. I love that this episode exists. And this guy, I had him on my radio show. He came on to share his story, and it's chilling. He's got this house in Washington, Seattle area, at this place that he's renting, and all of this crazy activity. And he sends me the footage, and it's bonkers. Like, he's sitting in his living room with his phone, recording himself playing video games. And this is a middle-aged African-American gentleman. And all of a sudden you'd hear this, and he'd turn and show the camera, and a vase or a glass votive with candles would smash against the wall. But it always happened just outside of frame. And his reactions were not my reactions or what you would probably do. So it's very hard to swallow, because he would be like, oh no, they threw a glass votive across the room. And that was about the extent of the energy he had for it. And then he had one room where something painted in black paint, like the Hanging Man, 666, all of these other weird things in this computer room of his. So I talked to Zach after I did the radio episode. I'm like, hey, buddy, if you want like an Amityville style case, I think I might have it. So he brought me on and he hit me up. He goes, what do you think of this? I said, well, this case is going to be bigger than the Amityville case and current day allowing us to investigate it, or it's a huge hoax. So we went in and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. And I don't even think we got a dust orb in that episode. But what we did find is, he showed us the room with the black paint on the wall. And when he left the room, I looked at the guys and I said, guys, I'm not one to judge at all, but this ghost is fabulous because he sponge painted these things on the ceiling and on the walls. It wasn't like just dipped his, muddy claw into the black paint, of which the guy claimed there was no black paint in the house, and made these markings. And then we set up in the garage was our command center. And as we're filming, Bill Chappell, who was one of the other investigators, nudges me and he goes, he said, there's no black paint in the house, right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, he's right, but it's right there in the garage. And in front of us is a can of black paint that's been opened, and there's black paint on the sides of the can. Yeah. So we walked away not believing the story. And that guy got really upset, and we aired the episode. And the fans spoke, and it was, how could you waste an hour of my time? This is so boring. This was so stupid. I'm so pissed that you guys rolled me into this for an hour. I could have been watching something else. And I laughed. I'm like, are you guys crazy? You always question these shows. And when we show you what happens at some of them, and this is a legitimate episode, and all you're doing is tearing us all down, and we're a waste of time and a waste of space. And they're calling us fakes and frauds because we're not catching something.
Right.
It was absurd. And trust me, the networks paid attention, and you never saw another episode where we didn't catch something.
Yeah, right. Follow up to that, there's the explosion of newer social media like TikTok and Snapchat and that. I'm a huge YouTube junkie.
Right.
I follow multiple channels that are paranormal related, of things caught on camera, those kind of things, and then there are videos that just 3 hours of various TikTok videos per se. And there's a lot of like really interesting videos that, and I'm wondering like the impact that, because that's mostly a younger crowd, I would imagine, that is using that. And it's so interesting to me to see what looks to be authentic experiences that people are sharing. I know that there are people that are going to stage things, but there's also, you can kind of spot when they are. Overacting really happens a lot in those, but there are some, what I feel like, really authentic experiences by really young 20-somethings, late teenagers. Do you think social media impact on the paranormal community is like trends positive, or is it more of a negative effect, or what kind of thoughts do you have on that?
Our field is wrought with easy, irritable people, and they will discount most things. And then what's funny to me is the things that they'll accept on face value as being paranormal, and then the other things that they summarily dismiss. It's always strange because I think, well, why? What makes this person less believable than that person? And why is this cooler than that? And let's face it, the TikTok generation, the YouTube generation is out there now. And I thought the MTV generation had a short attention span. The new generation has an even shorter attention span. That's why a lot of these things are under 30 minutes long, or sometimes under 5 minutes long, and they're just showing you the highlight reel. Yeah. I think that a lot of people that like the long form storytelling don't like the short little bursts. Therefore, they think it's a lot more fake, and they think it's silly. And some of these people put themselves in positions where they do look silly doing things. But when you're only seeing that segment of them, because that's all you as a viewer can tolerate anymore is 5 minutes,
right?
Then it's hard to judge properly. So I give everybody credit. Go out and do what you do. There's people that loved the Holzer Files and Ghosts of Devil's Perch, loved it. So, this is the best shows that have ever existed. That's amazing. I used to like Ghost Hunters and I loved Ghost Adventures. They look so schlocky next to you guys now. And I love that they say that. That's so meaningful and sweet. But without shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, the rest of our shows wouldn't have happened. There had to be a success behind those programs to open the door for us. Now, we don't investigate like Zach and the team, but they don't investigate like us. And there were plenty of people who thought we were just slow old people. We weren't the cool in-your-face group that Zach and Aaron and Billy and JR. So there's different strokes for different folks. We can enjoy the content. We can enjoy the presenters for what they bring to it. But I will tell you, if you ever see an episode of me on Ghost Adventures, I had no TV experience. I just was going along for the ride, and I didn't want to look like a buffoon. I didn't want to seem jumpy or weird. Yeah. And I'd watch the episodes, and I'm like, my God, am I boring to watch? Holy I just am so boring. And then when I started filming the Holzer Files, I was told, listen, did you just have an experience? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, so that's your reaction in the real world, is to just kind of look over your shoulder and go, huh, I heard that. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay, well, that's boring. And they said, do you ever wonder why all the people on YouTube with their YouTube channels don't do well and they don't get picked up by networks? It's because they're so cool that they're not bringing the audience along for the ride. So he said, I'm not asking you to fake anything. I'm just asking you to project like you're in a huge theater and you want to let the people in the last row know you heard something. So when you hear something, don't just go, I heard something. Jerk your head in the direction so we have a cut to moment and make your expression big so that the people in the last row of the theater realize, oh, crap, something just happened. So the overreactions, I understand how that can be frustrating for some people, but then I do tell those people, go watch a YouTube show. And the guys that are all too cool for school, they're great. They might tell the best history, but they're boring to watch as an investigator because you don't feel drawn into what they're doing. You don't feel like you're part of it. But when, whoa, holy, did you hear that? What the beep, son of a beep? It's internal dialogue I'm having anyway, because it is freaking me out. And I'm just trying not to look like a shaky, nervous Nelly in front of my co-hosts, but then just let it out. Be that person. I can still be respectful, empathetic, loving, and follow in the vein of Dr. Hans Holzer and not make it boring for people to watch.
Yeah.
I did not in any way, shape, or form fake the experience, but I did amp up the response to the experience just a little bit, just so that once I saw that, because he showed me, he goes, watch. And he recorded me doing it my way and then doing it his way. And he goes, which show would you watch? I go, oh, yeah, I definitely watched the guy that slung his head over his shoulder and looked like he might have just pooped his pants. And he goes, right. People want that. Then that's when it grabs their attention and they're like, oh, crap, what just happened to Dave?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, yeah. And it's, same reason why in a movie you get shot and fly backwards 3 feet. That's not what happens. You get shot and you might not even realize you've been shot, or you get shot and you touch it and you kind of slump to the ground slowly. But I need you to feel that impact with me. I need you to be a part of that moment. And that's what happens. But then I've been a part of a couple of violent little moments on TV. I did not overreact at all. And those scared the bejesus out of me, when I got knocked down at the Whaley house. I got thrown backwards into a bathroom, split my back open in season 2 of the Holzer Files. I got bit in the arm by something that left teeth marks on my arm in the Holzer Files. And when I was in the Ghost of Devil's Perch, I thought I was having a heart attack. I felt like something ruptured inside me. And the idea that it was paranormal didn't even register. I thought, oh crap, I'm about to die on TV. This is horrible. Something hit so hard and blinding, and I crumpled to the ground screaming, and they rushed me to the hospital that night. And I was in the hospital overnight. They ran every test they could. Nothing was out of sync. As a matter of fact, the doctors come in and look at me and go, boy, at your age and weight, we really thought you were going to look like a mess. And you're not too bad. We don't know what caused that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a few days later that they uncovered that this guy, Richard Sims, had been shot in that location. And Cindy, the media, put it together and she goes, Dave, I think you walked into like a psychic scar. You were in that same place at that moment and you caught the effect of it, which sounds maddening. It's like, what the hell? Even I had the experience and I'm like, nah, I don't think so.
Right.
And then she's like, how do you explain it? You have no mark. You went to the hospital. They can't find anything wrong with you. And I'm telling you, here's the article that says Richard Sims was shot right here.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, I have no better answer for that. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I've had psychics on, one in particular, that whenever he travels and he goes to places, the spirits want to let him know how they die. And so he'll get shot. He'll experience stuff like that. I want to ask about Hans Holzer. I think you were the last one to interview him. And I'm curious, what did you walk away from that? What do you think he believed? And what did you learn that surprised you from talking to him and doing that interview?
It was the last radio interview he did. I was lucky enough to have connected with his daughter, Alexandra. She was releasing her first book and he released his final book, and they came out from the same publisher. So Alexandra arranged for me to interview her first, and then the second hour would be Dr. Hans Holzer. So I realized that I reached him at an end stage in his game. He was very cantankerous. He did not like the paranormal TV programs. He thought they were juvenile. He thought that all the yelling and screaming was idiotic. He was not that guy. He was always very calm, even in the face of listening to the audio that he would capture. When these mediums would be thrashing about, he was always like eerily calm, like a Bond villain calm, right? When the world's burning around him and he's just like, no, you don't belong here. You can't continue to do what you're doing. I need you to step away. Meanwhile, his medium's like, oh, get it out of my body. And he's just like, no, we don't want this. You need to stop. So when I talked to him, he was bitter about the shows and the success of the shows and the way that they were doing things. And sadly, it was not his finest interview, because every question I asked, I got the same response for an hour. And it was, you don't need that. You need a good trance medium, and you go in and you take notes and you record and you listen to the trance medium, and what they give you, you can corroborate, then you deal with the ghost. Okay, well, how do you feel about, the new uptick with all of the new equipment that wasn't available to you? What you need is a good trance medium. And that was it. Literally for an hour. When I got done, I told Alexandra, I said, I don't think I'm going to air your father's part of the interview. And she got very offended. And I'm like, I think I'm doing him a favor. And she said, do you know what I had to do to pull strings to get him on the show? And I'm like, I understand, but Alex, I don't think this is his finest interview. And she insisted. So we played it, and people liked it for what it was. But, he was very upset, I think, by the way the new world handled the paranormal. And this guy was stoic. He didn't get shaken like many of us would. And he had access to do and see and be in amazing places. But he wrote about ghosts and UFOs and witchcraft and witches. As a matter of fact, he was a practicing witch, warlock, whatever the proper terminology for him would be, psychic phenomena, Bishop Pike. He wrote about all these amazing topics and traveled the world and got to examine these things. That's why we're so lucky to be able to reopen these case files 50 years deep with original video, original audio, original photographs. And it was just astounding that we had this opportunity. I'm so proud of the 23 episodes we got to do. I think that they missed the boat naming the show. They called it the Holzer Files. And when you're on a network that has Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Nation, Kindred Spirits, Destination Fear, Ghost Brothers, the Holzer Files, right? We sound like the Rockford Files for 2021. And they never did us any favors in the promotion art either. It was just the three of us standing there trying to look like hard asses in front of an old building. They didn't show ghosts in the window. They didn't make it misty or creepy looking and no ambiance in the pictures. So you really didn't know what you were tuning in for. And unfortunately, the way that civilization and society works now, if you don't sell it, they don't know what they're going to watch. I remember legitimately as a kid not wanting to watch MASH or SWAT because I thought MASH was probably about cooking and potatoes and SWAT was probably about bugs. People still have that mentality today. However, I was 7 when I didn't want to watch those shows for those reasons. A lot of adults, you have ghost, spirits, ghost, fear, ghost, Holzer Files. Not a lot of people knew who Dr. Hans Holzer was, and we didn't get to service that part. We did really well, but just not well enough to garner a 3rd season, sadly.
Do you think Hans Holzer would have been proud of that show? Would have liked it?
I would like to think he would. I would hope he would. I'm sure, like his family, he would have liked his family to be more involved in it. But, we ran into a snafu with, Alexandra's a medium and she's an investigator. Well, it's hard to reopen these case files and have a medium that doesn't know anything about the case, but yet you're the daughter of the guy that investigated.
Yeah.
Who's going to believe she's got all these files in her home and she hasn't looked them over? So it was more of a credibility issue for her. We didn't want people second guessing her, and it wasn't my decision. I'm just saying what the network and the production company did. So she was in every episode. She was kind of the voice of her father for us, tying things together and giving us some insights to what her father felt about these cases. And that was great. But I don't know. Like I said, depending on what part of his career he was in at the end, no, I think he would have hated the show because we used technology.
Interesting.
And our medium was not a trance medium to his standards. Yeah. But I think if he would have sat down and watched it and seen the respect we showed to him, to his legacy, to the ghosts that we involved ourselves with, and the way we handled his stuff, I would hope he would at least have enjoyed that. So the egotist in me wants to say, oh, of course he would have loved it because we were amazing. Yeah. But the reality, the pragmatist in me tells me he had such a defined way of doing it. And I don't know that he would have been as happy with it the way it was created.
over the years, Ghost Hunters really was, I've always been into paranormal since I think I realized it when I was early teens.
Mm-hmm.
And it has become a growing interest as I've certainly the past couple decades. I've always had my toes in the water. I feel like there's a lot of it that's just in your own time. However, I guess there's like a tipping point in someone's career where they're able to pursue this passion of paranormal investigation and also make a living doing it. And I've always been curious of what that looks like.
Well, I'd love to know. As soon as you find an answer, can you tell me? I'm a guy that piecemeals my career together by doing multiple things. I don't know. It's so tough to say. A lot of it's lightning. You're in the right place at the right time. Jay and Grant were covered in a news article, and a network was looking for an interesting show for the Sci-Fi Channel, and they saw this story about two plumbers who are paranormal investigators, and that was enough of a hook to say, let's try this Ghost Hunters. And then you've got Ghost Adventures that comes along, and here you've got an ex Las Vegas DJ, and Aaron Goodwin he worked, I think, in NASCAR and MMA fights he would film. And so, all these guys had diverse, interesting backgrounds, and the paranormal kind of brought them together with their fascination, each having their own little flashes of it. And then they combined together to create this whirlwind force that's now like 30 seasons in. So you're just in the right place at the right time. And I've been lucky that I was one of the last people to interview Dr. Holzer. So when they were doing this, and they're putting together the show, I'm one of the last guys to interview him. I'm friends with his daughter. As a matter of fact, I keep a nice little snapshot of this in my phone. And I was reminded of this during the filming of Holzer Files. We had become friends, Alexandra and I, and she started up my fan page on Facebook. And she's like, hey, everybody, come join the fan page I've created for Dave Schrader, on Facebook. So that was a sweet timing. It was just being in the right place at the right time, being somebody that is charismatic and can bring to it a different flavor. And our team brought something different to it than the other shows did. And we were given an opportunity to ride the sails of the captain before us. So a lot of it is just being in the right place at the right time, doing the things that you want. But
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There are online YouTubers that are making tenfold what I ever made on my show, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to, if you have the passion and you do it, you go out there and put yourself out there, be a part of it, find your niche, find what makes you different and do it. And don't always follow in the footsteps of the people that came before you. Break some glass ceilings, create new ways of examining things. And I think that's what makes it interesting. I fell into it from radio. I took what I was good at. And even when I started in radio, it was not fantastic, but I was curious enough and loved it enough that I could grow into the position and grow into the field. And then that opened up other doors. I got to co-author a book. Then I got, I was invited to speak at other people's conventions around the world. When you start building up that repertoire behind you and they want somebody that has some legitimacy to their name or is recognizable commodity in the field, and they look at a Dave Schrader who's got a book out, host on Coast to Coast AM, hosting his own longtime paranormal radio show, right, worked behind the scenes on Ghost Adventures and has been on a dozen episodes of Ghost Adventures. That's not a bad person to connect with. Just paying attention to those opportunities and taking them and getting outside your comfort zone to do that. And that's what afforded me the opportunity. And being aware, because I post all the time. I used to when they were hiring for those shows. One of the networks or production companies would reach out and say, hey, we're looking for this kind of person. And I'd take their post and I'd share it on my social media. And I think a lot of people on TV owed their careers to seeing the ad on my Facebook page or Twitter. So I wish I had a specific answer for you, but keep in touch with me because I'd be happy to investigate with you sometime. We could go somewhere and check it out. Yeah.
Well, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, I would love that. I think that's really great insight and information and perspective. And I definitely am with you. Not only am I a YouTube junkie in consumption, but I talk about YouTube being such an opportunity for anybody that is passionate about anything.
Right.
It may not appear overnight or in a year. It really takes consistency and time. But an avenue such as YouTube, it truly, you can do anything.
Yeah. And now there are so many tools at home to help you create and make really interesting videos. And earlier you asked me about the legitimacy of shows. The problem with shows now to me on like TikTok and YouTube is the fact that I can go out and buy a $199 software package, editing package that I can put really amazing special effects into my YouTube video that they weren't even able to put into paranormal TV shows 30 years ago. And it can look more compelling and believable than an actual ghost image that we captured, right? So it's made it harder for me because a lot of these people are very tech savvy.
Yeah.
And I am left wondering how much of what I'm seeing is real and how much of what I'm seeing is coming from the amazing software and AI tools that are out there now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know I hijacked that on you, Bob, but that you definitely brought up that AI issue. And I've thought about that. Like, how is that going to affect all of this? Because it feels like it's already such a stigmatized world. Like, I can only imagine what people are going to be doing and manipulating.
Well, that's why I've kind of taken the stance, if I could real quick, I've always taken the stance of I'm not here to convince either one of you that the paranormal is real, but I'll take you along on my journey and you can watch what happens to me.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm having experiences and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, that's what's important to me. I don't care if you believe me. I don't care if you think I'm the greatest paranormal investigator on the planet Earth. It's flattering. I'm in it for the spirits. I'm in it to try to answer things for them or be their voice again. So, I think you have to have thick skin. You've got to certainly be doing it for the right reasons. If you're just going in to get scared and run around and scream and yell, there's a billion people out there like that already. There's got to be something unique to what you do to make it stand out. And I think that just being true to who you are and not worrying about how other people are going to perceive it, you'll find your tribe. You'll find the people that will connect with you because they like the way you do these things and the way you represent yourself in the story. And that's it. It's like any kind of TV show that you watch, whether it's a scripted or unscripted program, you fall in love with an aspect of that show and the reality of that person is putting forward as an actor or as a reality TV personality. And that's what draws you in. And most people will tell you, we know that Pawn Stars is fake. We know that they're bringing ringers in with these pieces that are never going to sell those pieces to Rick. But it tells a story and we're still getting the end game. We're giving you history you wouldn't have learned anywhere else but right here. And right now we're telling you about this Beatles guitar pick. And in the next second, we're going to tell you about a bullet from the Lone Ranger. Yeah. And the next minute, we're going to tell you about a map from Magellan. Where else are you going to get that kind of information? So it's cool that we can take these micro doses of information and storytelling and present them in a fascinating way and finding that audience. And like you said, do what you love to do, put it out there, and it may take a while to build. But if you've got something and a passion behind it, I think it will grow.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
Yeah, I think I might even end on that. I was going to ask you kind of a dark question. I don't think I should go there.
No. I love a good dark question. Please go ahead.
All right. Which, you've experienced a lot in your life, and I'm just wondering which terrifies you the most? Is it ghosts, demons, Bigfoot, UFOs, or death?
Death has been the main thing that has, inspired me throughout. I remember being very young, like 4 or 5 years old, being afraid to go to sleep because I may not wake up the next day. And that may be because death was introduced to me at a very early age. And what death meant was you're just not here anymore. But death has always been a kind of a defining image for me. I've learned to come over some of that fear of death and accept it, especially as I get older and lose more people. But I think the things that scare me more are not the supernatural. It's the realities. I'm in my daughter developing type 1 diabetes and I almost lost her twice. That to me is more terrifying. I would rather you put me in a room with demon infested piranha than have me have to face that moment of mortality with one of my own children. So that to me is much, much more frightening. The positions we put each other in as humans and the way we show such utter disregard for one another's beliefs and lifestyles, that I find much more horrifying and horrific than I do any of these other cases, because I think the paranormal is more normal. More people have had these kind of experiences. And I think it's something that is actually more of a unifying mold. It's something we're all fascinated by. It's something that brings us all together because we all want to know what comes next. Even the skeptics will tell you, I wish I could have that moment for myself, but I just don't believe it's true.
Yeah.
So I think the paranormal is the great evener because every sexuality, every financial status, every race, every color, every age has a fascination in the magic of the world around us and trying to see those moments for themselves. The rest of the world is what's scary.
I agree. The older I get, the more the world seems to be a lie to me. You know, I find a hard time finding the truth. And if there's one thing about death that we all will face, to me, it's the ultimate truth. You know, because at the end, that's the ultimate truth, whatever it is.
Mhm.
All right, I took us down the dark side, but let's end on a positive note. Dave, what else are you doing? Is there anything you want to promote or tell us about in the works right now?
Well, I'm currently working on a few projects that are filming that we hope will see the light of day in 2025. I am the author of a new book called Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, and it's a collection of 15 short stories that are real paranormal encounters that have happened from friends and listeners around the world. 2 of my own stories, one including a haunted doll and one including a haunted hospital, are involved in the book. So that book is available. You can find it on my website. If you live in America, I can get you a signed copy on my website, or wherever you live, you can order it off of Amazon.com and check out the ratings. People really seem to love it. And I'm working on book 2 and 3 right now. So I'm hoping to have book 2 out by the end of this year, book 3 into the beginning of next year. Plus, I'm the host of the Paranormal 60 podcast, which is live on YouTube Monday and Wednesdays. And if you can't watch it live, the episodes live there forever. We have a lot of fun on the Wednesday night shows, our news shows, where I work with 3 or 4 of my friends from Texas and Illinois, and we share stories from around the world, news stories and paranormal encounters, and talk about them. And then Mondays are usually guest centric, where I'll have 1 or 2 guests on to discuss different elements of the paranormal. So that's the Paranormal 60, and you can listen to that, the audio version, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then I am now the host of the Paranormal 360 on Sunday nights in Minneapolis on News Talk 830 WCCO radio station. So if you live anywhere in the Twin Cities, you can listen on AM 830, or you can ask your smart device to play WCCO radio Sunday nights from 7 to 9 p.m. Central and ask it to set an alarm and start up for you, and you'll never miss an episode.
That's awesome. And I will close with the one thing. I think a documentary should be made about you and Jeff Belanger, because you both have had amazing journeys and a crossover with each other. And I think that would be kind of an interesting, maybe throw in Jim Harold on the side, who knows? But I think that would be an interesting documentary at some point. I would certainly watch it. So,
well, if only I knew a documentarian that puts these kind of things together. Huh. Well, when it comes to mind, maybe we could do that. But I'd love to. Jeff Belanger is one of my best friends today. While we're doing this, he just turned 50 years old. I wish him all the success and love and happiness in the world. And he has been a guy that has helped lift this field and lift me up in this field. And we should all have a Jeff Belanger in our life.
Yeah, he's a very giving guy. He supports a lot of good causes. He's done a lot of great things. So,
Yep.
You guys complement each other well. I enjoy it when I see you guys do things together. So, Dave, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And Kyle, always appreciate you too. But this has been a great show, and I really look forward to sharing it with the audience.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared. Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit afraidofnothingpodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's afraidofnothingpodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.